Hello, Regina.
Hey,
How
it's
are
good.
you?
Doing well. Enjoying Tucson. So that's been nice to be in the warm. I don't know how I'm going to handle the heat this summer, but we'll see. It'll be good.
Well, it's definitely the opposite of what I'm experiencing, which has been like last night I was up near Red Lodge in a little town called Luther, Montana, on like the border of the Custer Gallatin National Forest, and it just snowed all night. And I have some leaks in my van.
No. Does it get so cold in the van too? Or does it
Yeah,
stay?
it does. I mean, I have three animals with me, so that adds some heat. But and I do have a furnace, but like so this my van, which as you may know is named Tortigra, because she's a mix of a turtle and a tiger. She's a 1994 model, so she has a furnace, like a propane furnace, and it works, but then it does like some weird stuff where even if I turn off the propane and turn it off, it just like keeps blowing air all night, which is then cold air. So I haven't been using it, but I'm staying warm enough. I'm alive.
Yeah, good.
So anyway, thank you so much for being here. Another fellow local Cody, Wyomingite.
hmm
And I'd just love you to kind of tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up in Cody. I was there from first grade to when I graduated high school. And then I went to Pittsburgh for my undergraduate degree where I studied neuroscience and anthropology.
Woo.
I really love combining them in the fact that specifically with mental health. So like depression specifically is I'm really interested in questions of meaning and wholeness. And I'm totally convinced that depression specifically has something to teach us about being human and it's not just a disease. And
Yes.
this disease model is really limiting and it's causing a lot of suffering. Like I know for me with my depression, when it was like, here's a pill, good luck, and it didn't work, it was really hard to get out of that. So I have like an academic and a personal interest in that. But the neuroscience is interesting. I joke that I got a neuroscience degree to be able to talk to my father because he's a neurologist and super intellectual. So I was like, I need to learn how to speak this guy's language. So I
Yes.
got a degree in neuroscience. And then the anthropology is where my heart's really at. Like I love the questions of what does it mean to be human and like how do we engage with people who aren't like us. Yeah, and so then I graduated in a pandemic. So I graduated last spring. I've been graduated for a year now, which is crazy. And it's been really hard to kind of have my wings clipped with that. Like you're supposed to take off after graduation. I didn't get a walk. I had an online ceremony. And then
Mhm.
the job market is like, it's so hard right now. But
Yes.
so I've been kind of nomadic this last year. I lived with my mom back in Wyoming for a while, and then I volunteered in North Carolina for a bit, and then I helped my uncle in Nebraska flip a house, and now I'm in Tucson working online. So all the things.
That is phenomenal. Yes. Well, I mean, I think that you also are a bit of the bent that everything is happening for a reason and is going to tie together into a larger story. Sometimes it's hard to see those things when we're like still super close to them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd love to hear more about some of your thoughts and your own experiences with depression. I mean, that was a pretty, and also I love this idea, right? Because I've been thinking about this a lot too in regards to anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
because I've been experiencing, and just in like, not in this like crippling way or anything, getting more and more able to observe myself, but like, okay, so this is a teacher, like this is coming to tell me like this, whatever paradigm I'm running on, like isn't working anymore. So like what needs to give? So what are your thoughts and experiences on that with depression?
Yeah. So I the first time I really learned from depression was I studied abroad in India my junior year of college. I absolutely loved it. Became this huge, big, beautiful person. I'm back to the same life that I had before I went. And I was discombobulated. I was like, what is this? Like my life is small again. And when I'm a bigger person and I don't fit.
Wow.
And the depression came in with that. It was like, my life doesn't look like I want it to. And so that's what it was trying to tell me. Um, And then it
Yes. Wait, stop and say that again. What was the depression trying to tell you?
My depression was telling me that my life didn't look like how I needed it to look for like my soul and my purpose.
Yes.
And as a 20-year-old human, it was like, oh, like you're young, you have work to do. You may not feel like you're young. Like I've always felt older than I am. I've never really identified with my age. And so being a young person now with all the craziness, but not really feeling like a young person has been an interesting.
You definitely have an old soul and
Yeah.
always have. Even now, I almost like energetically, I just feel almost like I'm talking to someone who's not even just my age, but like older than me, which is interesting since we're like 10 years apart.
Yeah, there's a fun story. I always get along better with people like your age than my age. It just clicks better for me. But I'm named after my great grandmother. Like she died while my mom was pregnant with me. Like my mom was holding her hand as she passed away, and so I have her name. And I also have I just got engaged, and I have her engagement ring.
Congratulations!
So, like I'm not wearing it because I work from home, but I have her ring, and so it's just another connection. But apparently, when I was like 3 or 4, like little, I would say things that my grandma would say, and so my mom's like, "This baby is older than a baby."
Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so that's a theme for me. Yeah, and it's interesting too because I don't know where I want to head with this, but the idea of old soul and then young body and depression and crazy world, like many layers.
Yes, absolutely. And so you were at some point you were on prescriptions for depression. Like what were you on? What was that like? And are you still?
So I came back from India in December. School started again in January. I went to the doctor in like February and I was like, hey, I think I'm depressed. They gave me, it's called the HAM-D scale. It's 10 questions like to determine how severe your depression is or if you're depressed. Doctor gave that to me. We didn't talk about my results at all, but then she came back in and said, okay, I'm going to give you a prescription for this. And I was like, okay, this was at the Student Health Center at Pitt. And so then they gave me Lexapro, which is escitalopram is the generic. I know that because I worked in a pharmacy for 2.5 years. Anyway, so they put me on the Lexapro. I take it for like 2 months and like nothing really happens. I'm like, I still feel crappy. Like I still feel empty and dark and just
depressed.
Yeah, I think I was actually listening to this podcast the other day, and they were talking about how depression is like a very deprived word. Like it doesn't do justice to the state of depression.
What was the podcast? Because we can
it's the On Being podcast.
Oh, I love On Being. Yes.
Yeah, it's the episode called The Soul of Depression. I highly recommend it.
Okay.
But I think Anita Barros, I think one of the poets on there, she was talking about how depression isn't depression, it's like ravishment. Like you're completely ravaged. Like you're just and I was like, okay, that is the language we need to like, that strength of language is something we need to be talking about.
Yes.
Yeah. So I was on Lexapro for 2 months. It wasn't even touching this thing that I was feeling. So I go back to the doctor and I said, hey, this isn't working. And she's like, okay, well, we'll try Wellbutrin with the Lexapro in hopes that the Wellbutrin activates the Lexapro. And I was like, what?
Can we pause for a second as well? Like,
yeah.
Was there any mention of at least a more holistic approach as far as like, yes, we're going to put you on prescription medicine and also maybe some lifestyle changes, maybe some meditation, maybe some like, or was it just like, oh, we'll add another pill? Like what was?
So I was also seeing a somatic experiencing counselor at the time, like once every 2 weeks or something, because my parents were also recently divorced. So there's also that. So I was going to that counselor and the primary care doctor knew that. So she's like, okay, cool, we're just going to let that happen. But I definitely felt that there wasn't like the attention to like my diet or like exercise. Like it was vaguely like glanced over. And I know she's like, I don't blame the doctor at all. Like she's doing the best she can with what she has, but I didn't feel like this was how we should see people who are feeling depressed. Yeah. So, and I was aware of that as I was depressed, but even looking back on it more, I'm like, oh, we can change this for the better. So that's where I'm really interested in changing that system. But it was crazy to me when I go back and she's like, yeah, let's add another pill so that the first pill is activated. And I was like, okay. So we like try it and it didn't work for me. And then because of my neuroscience background, I was like, okay, well, I have the language to like know why this didn't work for me. If depression is an imbalance of chemical processes in your brain, if it's a monoamine imbalance, then I should be able to research this. So for my senior writing thesis, I researched the neuroscience of depression, and we don't know like anything about what depression actually is in the brain. We have ideas about it, but it's not proven, or it's very nebulous. And antidepressants don't work for 1/3 of people. And we don't really talk about that. We kind of just expect it to happen. But yeah, they only work for 2/3 of people. And I was one of the 1/3 who it didn't work. And then it was like, okay, well, good luck. So after I went back to the doctor, I was like, hey, these aren't working. She stopped writing me prescriptions and didn't follow up. And I just kind of figured it out. But yeah.
And so what did happen that led to, I mean, it probably helped in a larger way, I would guess too, that you were sort of empowered in doing your own research and doing your own, literally, you're like, I'm going to take this and like leverage it for my thesis.
Yes. And for me is I found myself sitting the next fall, I was sitting in a class called Culture and Politics of Mental Health, which is an anthropology class. And we started talking about ideas of mental illness and disease and how it's not like a stable phenomenon. Like if you look at the feet, like everything, like specifically PTSD, it has a whole historical lineage. Yes. And you can like track it and like see what it is become. Like we have these concepts and we make them real more than they are real, and we like uncover them sometimes. I'm not saying that about everything, but specifically with mental illness, it's fascinating because like schizophrenia was used to paint the Black male as more violent and aggressive in the 50s and 60s. Like that was a deliberate thing that happened. And so the politics of mental illness is a whole other thing. And so I was sitting in this class and then we're talking about anxiety, PTSD, schizophrenia, and there was no like specific depression part of this class, but I was like, oh my goodness, like I can write the book that can talk about this.
Yes.
For the next class. So like Cheryl Strayed talks about how she has a second book like beating inside of her. Like I do too. And I thought that was going to look like a PhD project and like that kind of research. So I applied to a bunch of PhD programs this year, but COVID said like, no, like not right now. So I still have this idea and this passion, but it's not manifesting in a PhD right now. And instead it's looking more like I volunteer for the Community Supported Agriculture program here. And so then I'm like now really interested in ideas of food systems and food sovereignty and like how eating with your place and your time connects to wholeness.
Yes.
So yeah, by not going down this academic route, my questions are getting a little more well-rounded, which is really interesting.
And I really relate with you on that, I think, as far as just having a pretty academic bent and kind of choosing to maybe go more into a community and life experience kind of path towards incorporating that curiosity. So do you know anything, or can you speak any to, I guess when I hear you talking about some of this mental health stuff anthropologically, it makes me, and it kind of ties in, I guess, too, with, you know, food systems and community as far as like connection to the land. And I'm sure this question has been asked a lot, but what is a little bit, or whatever you might know about that narrative of depression anthropologically at this point, as far as like, is this a pretty new phenomenon? Like, was this something that was happening when we were more, because we would like to imagine, right? Like people who were connected to the land and the present moment, and like Native Americans or indigenous peoples in general, and be like, oh, well, they never got depressed. But I don't know if that's true.
Yeah, so I don't know the whole, like, I haven't had the time to dive in.
You haven't written the book yet.
I haven't written the book yet. I have a list and I have all these resources that I'm like dying to get into. But like now is not the right time. I'm gathering my well-being right now and figuring out how to be an adult in a crazy world.
Yes.
So the book will happen, just not yet. But it's interesting because there is like before depression, there was melancholia.
Right.
And this idea of like melancholy. And I'm really curious about how much like depression, anxiety, languaging is caught up in like European worldview.
Yes.
Because like I just saying the word melancholy, I thought of like the gray skies in London or like something like that. That image is very
in
connected.
industry, like the Industrial Revolution. I think of like smog and like city darkness. Like,
yes, I definitely like get that visceral image as well. And so I'd be super interested to like dig into that more. I think about like I read Braiding Sweetgrass recently, and
oh,
she
I've heard who wrote that again? I've heard that's a great book.
it's so good. Robin Wall Kimmerer. I listened to it on audio and like she reads it and
Okay.
it's really good. But she talks about like I don't remember her talking about depression specifically, but this idea of reciprocity and like letting your environment hold you.
Mm,
Like one of the books that really changed my mindset on depression, it's called Lost Connections by Johan Hari. I'll definitely send you that link. But he
okay.
talked about the 9 causes of depression. And he had a similar experience to me where he was on like antidepressants and it wasn't really helping. And like he was on it for like years. And he was like, this is kind of helping, but I want it to be more. Anyways, he's a journalist. And so he chronicles these 9 causes, and only one of them is like biology and genetics. The other 8 are like disconnection from meaningful work, disconnection from a
Yes.
secure future, disconnection from nature. And
Yes.
like I really like the nature one because he talks about like getting into the nature and like walking and stuff, but I think it goes even deeper where it's like knowing what foods you eat, knowing what food is like foraging. Like I really want to get into knowing about wild harvests and that kind of thing.
Mm,
Because like the Cartesian dualism, like worse, mind and body are separate, humans and
right.
creation are separate. I think
Right.
it's so damaging.
So
Uh,
damaging. Yeah,
mhm.
and I really like that too, because I mean I've been getting a lot more into like the languages of astrology and tarot, and I really link it to nature as well though, because the whole point is that, and foraging links in with this too, and what we're eating, it's cyclical. Like
Yes.
things go in seasons and cycles, whether they're phases of our lives or phases of, literally what we call the seasons in nature, or, our soul growth, etc. And so I think there's something to be said about having that sort of, what's the word that I'm looking for? Like relatively being able to locate yourself as to what part of the season you're in, rather than expecting that you should always feel this certain way, and like not having any sort of reference of like, well, it's winter right now, which means that I'm eating these kinds of foods, which means that my body is doing this and therefore my emotions are doing this, and etc.
Yeah, it's like getting out of like the chronos, like the linear time, and like into the
Yes.
like
Kairos.
yes. Yeah, and like to get back to talk about my grandma again, like she lived on a farm in the Great Depression, like my great grandma. And so she had her whole garden, like an orchard and everything. And I go into my grandma now still lives in the same farmhouse. And so I go like into the basement there, and they have all of these like canning supplies and like just all of these things that I have lost. Like my generational knowledge has not been passed on to me. And I'm like blown away by like the wisdom and the truths that my grandmother knew that I don't anymore. And I'm like, what? Like it's this much time and it's already gone.
Right. That's so true. Although just speaking to you at all, you also have, this whole new realm of knowledge that, and I sense, again, in like neurology and anthropology, and I sense just a lot of beautiful potential for that kind of integration between, because you're also aware of that loss of ancestral knowledge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
I'm always bringing things together and like trying to bring like new things to come out of just the juxtaposition of ideas.
right. So another question I have, and I would guess that this is something you've probably looked into, and I can't remember the name of the author right now, but I don't know if you've heard of this practice of like releasing trapped emotions. And there's a lot of different strategies for this now. The one that I'm specifically talking about is like using the magnet to go across your meridian lines. I'll link to that book as well. And I've talked about it before, but I just finally, and you know how synchronistic everything is. It's like I had listened to part of this book before and like kind of been whatever, like integrating it with everything else. And then on my drive, I had started listening to it again because I hadn't finished it. And that was the point where he started to get into ancestral trauma and releasing inherited trapped emotions. And, you know, that gets into like epigenetics. And I just love to hear you speak on that from your point of view.
Oh my goodness. Epigenetics are insane. So like I first heard about them when I was a senior in high school. And I was like, this idea that your physiology is connected to your lineage, like it makes sense with like DNA and things.
Right.
But even the fact that like if my grandparents were in a famine, I'm more likely to be obese because my body is like,
wow.
Like that's a proven thing in science. So I love the idea that science is connecting to like spirituality in like a new and open way, and not in like this Eurocentric, like we're gonna prove that God exists, but like even more metaphysical and like holistic. Like I get really excited about those connections.
You are like a living representation of that connection, I feel like.
Yeah, for sure. When you mentioned like the techniques to like get rid of trauma in your body,
right.
Like my family of origin is so interesting because so like I have my super intellectual father, and then I have my mom who is like all sorts of qualified in all of these techniques. Like right now she does cranial sacral and somatic experiencing and hypnofit. So like I'm a interesting blend of their minds, and then I can talk to both of them. But so my mom has done so much work to like rid our family of like, my mom was the person who changed the cycle. So I'm out of a lot of trauma that my family had passed down, which is also really interesting because it opens my system up for new and interesting things and makes me so grateful for all the work she's done.
Yes. And that's exactly what I mean, so this is fascinating to me too, to hear you say that, because obviously, again, there are like all of these different tactics and strategies you can do, but they all say the same thing, like what you're saying right now, because what I'm listening to is like when one person in the line releases that, then all of the people past and future are then released of it. And there's this really beautiful story that it talks about in this book, and it's that he's on stage and he's, you know, so they do like muscle testing and sway testing to get in touch with the subconscious of people and ask what trapped emotions can be released at the time, and if, you know, and then sometimes it's an inherited trapped emotion, and he releases this inherited trapped emotion. And he says, you know, I can't personally see spirits, like I don't have that clairvoyant you know, muscle, either gift or muscle that's been exercised. But always when I do this, and there are people present who can, they see the spirit of the ancestors there while it's being released. And so he like says that on the stage. And afterwards, this woman from the audience comes up to him and she says, you know, I am one of those people who can see spirits. And I just wanted to let you know that, yes, you were right. The like grandmother, you know, who the emotion was being released from was there on stage. But I also want to let you know something else. There were about, she said, 200 other like souls that were gathered around that were all of the future progeny in that woman's lineage. And they were all there. I'm like getting goosebumps right now. Like they were all there celebrating also because they no longer had to carry that trapped emotion that would have continued to be passed on.
That's powerful. And then also I love when we're like aware of that gathering of souls and beings, because like to go back, depression and anxiety are these intense feelings of loneliness.
Yes.
And when you can slow down or like open and realize that you are always companioned, like there is somebody, some being, something looking out for you.
Amen.
Like that brings me so much peace.
Dude, me too. There's a you know, I love Wayne Dyer. I'm not sure if you ever listened to.
I've heard of it, but I haven't.
Oh, Wayne is great. He's awesome, but he's just, I mean, I'm sure you get lots of the same messaging from other places, but Wayne Dyer always likes to quote A Course in Miracles, which has been a great book for me, you know, being raised in the West and having been raised Presbyterian. It's like a nice familiar structural framework with that. But Wayne Dyer always quotes A Course in Miracles, which is like, and I can't even remember the full quote, but it's like, if you only knew who was always walking beside you. Like,
yes.
And he always quotes that. And you're exactly right. And if you can, it's funny too, because I've been studying about, I don't know if you ever read the like Philip Pullman series like the Golden Compass and all of those
Oh,
books?
I started it one time. I think I read the first one in like 8th grade, but I didn't read the whole thing.
Right. So, well, anyway, so to tie this in, so I've been learning a lot about tarot, like I told you, and one of the books that I'm reading right now is called Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. And if you've never heard of Aleister Crowley, he's like a very sort of notorious magician who is worth looking up. But he created probably the most popular, he and Lady Frida Harris, who is an artist, together created probably the most famous tarot deck of all time called the Thoth Tarot. And Aleister Crowley was like a legit like magician, esoteric genius. Like he had, I mean, people like kind of discredit him because he was also like a womanizer and like this crazy, like, you know,
a complicated human being with all the things.
exactly, a complex human. Like, how can a womanizer get it's like, you know, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. But anyway, so he has this big thing about that, like the most important step on your spiritual journey is getting in touch with what he calls your holy guardian angel. And it's this exact idea that we're talking about, like, or at least in the same realm, which is that we always have this holy guardian angel with us. And like that one of, you know, kind of that moment towards enlightenment on our path is when we actually start to like talk to and communicate with our holy guardian angel. And I brought up the Philip Pullman series because in this book, Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot, it basically talks about, like, have you ever heard of I can't remember, I think it was Plato. I'm pretty sure it was Plato, but maybe it was Aristotle, who the idea of the daemon, like Daemon.
You're like creative genius.
Yeah, well, so he called it genius. But it literally in these stories, the idea is that we each come down with this like soul companion who is our daemon. And I bring up the Philip Pullman series because that whole series, the Golden Compass series, which I read as a child, is based on that like Greek sort of mythology. Well, it's not mythology, it's like philosophy. And Philip Pullman personifies the daemon as each person who comes into the world has an animal spirit that is always with them, that they can talk to, that does these magical things for them, and it's their daemon. And so in this Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot, he talks about how the idea of the holy guardian angel, even though it seems like, oh, really? Like, we're talking about holy guardian angels now? Like, come on. He's like, this is like the exact same idea that, again, whether it was Plato or Aristotle, had about the daemon. Like, why does everyone keep saying these same things in different ways?
Yeah, it keeps coming up. And it's interesting too for me, the work I've done with like getting in connection with my guides is I've been told that they can't help you unless you ask. So, like there's the like big guardian angels like Michael, like, and they help no matter what. Like they're just here to help.
Archangels.
Yes. They help us humans. And then like your specific guides, you have to ask them. Be like, hey, can you help me with this? And then they can help. So I've been trying to ask for help metaphysically.
So can you talk more about how you learned about that and anything, like just your experience, who they are, what you're doing, how you got into that? That's also like, you're what, 22?
Yeah, I turned 23 on the 23rd of this month. So it's my golden birthday in a couple weeks, which is exciting.
Congratulations. So wait, so are you a Taurus or?
I'm a Gemini.
Gemini. Okay. It's so funny. I was literally just thinking about how I don't have any close friends that are Gemini sun sign. And now, like literally yesterday. Okay, so go on.
Yes. So my teacher, her name's Christina Rogers, and she lives in Mexico, and she does a lot of stuff like telehealth. And my mom connected me to her. But she's incredible. She's one of those people, she can talk to the guys, she can see them, and I'm just fascinated by it. Like every time I have a session with her, I like learn so much about everything. Like
does she have a website or something that people can? We'll make sure to link to her too.
Yeah, she teaches classes.
I want to find her.
Yeah, she's so cool. She teaches like how to get connected with your guides classes. So like I have 3 guides that I know of that she like introduced me to. I can talk about them if you want.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, people would love to hear that shit, dude. Do it.
It's funny because like I totally like I love this and I love like the depth of life that it brings me, and then I like go talk to like neuroscience people and like
Right.
they it doesn't.
I'm about the integration, so meet me in the middle.
Exactly. And so like the first guide I learned about, his name's Tahona, and he is like a Trobriand. There's like an island chain outside of Portugal. Like he's an indigenous person from there. Like that's how he presents. And his like guidance for me is this wholeness project. So like he is like an advisor for this depression research that I'm doing.
Yes.
Um,
I just got goosebumps.
yeah. And so he was the first one I met, and Christina's like, you have to go find a touchstone, like find a rock that you like when you're with that rock, like he is also there. And so I have I can grab them and show you.
Please, dude, I'm all about the rocks. Maybe this is why.
I don't know what kind of rocks they are, but
That doesn't matter. How do they make you feel?
so I learned about this last summer, and then I was on a hike with my sister, and I found this like it looks like a dragon egg, right?
What?
Like,
you found that on a hike?
yeah, it's just this like round, gigantic rock, and
It
it
does
has
look
like
a dragon egg.
yeah, it has like when you shake it, it like moves. And so every time I like hold this rock, I have like this creative well in my chest cavity that like opens. So like right now it's like buzzing. But I found this one in Wyoming, on like in the Bighorns, and that was the first thing I did. And then I like left it outside for the whole summer, and I would like hike up to it and visit it. And then when I was in North Carolina, I was volunteering at this animal sanctuary place, and I found this one. And so
Wow. They're like yin and yang.
exactly. So then this was an important part for the depression research because of like the shadow work. So like it just
yes.
yeah. Oh, and that hit me one time, and I was like, whoa. So like yeah, these are my touchstones, and I had them on my desk when I interviewed with the University of Chicago. Like it's just I just keep coming back to them when I am trying to answer these questions about wholeness. So those are I like rocks.
That is phenomenal.
Yeah, and then the second guide I learned about, she's like an earth spirit, a fairy, and her name is Rat-a-tat-tat, which it's just hilarious to me. Like
I love that. But you can get her energy. It's like hilarious because her energy is playful like that.
Yeah, and her guidance is to like help me like not take myself so seriously.
Yes.
She's like, go play in the dirt, like be a kid, like you don't have to be you don't have to be like normal all the time, like you can be weird. And I'm like I need to connect with her more because I still have this voice in my head where it's like you have to be normal and like put together and like collected and filtered.
Fuck
but
that
I'm
shit.
breaking out of that. Yeah, right. And then the third guy that I know of, I worked with her for this class I took. Her name's Serena, and she's the goddess of true-heartedness.
What? Oh my God. I am just
yeah. So she presents to Chris. I can't see them, I can feel them, but I'm more clairsentient than clairvoyant.
Me too.
Yeah, and so like I feel things in my body, especially with like my partner. Like if Logan's upset, I can feel it in my body, even before he knows it. And so I'm like, hey, are you okay? And he's like, yeah, I'm fine. And I'm like, okay. And then like 2 hours later, he's like, okay, you're right, I wasn't fine. So it gets me in trouble sometimes, but it's good. So Serena, she presents as like Diana, the goddess of the hunt. So she's this like
Diana is also Artemis, right?
I think so. I have to.
Yes.
Yeah, and so she's like this total badass. And the true-heartedness thing, she like specifically she said I had cracks in my heart. Ooh. And so I was in this class and we're like learning to connect with our guides and like ask for help, and my heart just like hurt, like it was just broken for like a solid month. And I was talking to Christina, my teacher, and she was like, Serena, like she's clearing you out, like she's opening your heart. And so it was crazy how visceral that experience was, because it was like every time I tried to connect with her, it would just like hurt. That now it doesn't hurt, which is I just have a big heart again.
Dude.
And so I try to talk to like in the mornings. Since COVID happened, I don't wake up with an alarm. Like I just wake up when I need to wake up. And so in that moment before getting out of bed and waking up, I try to just like slow down and just like, hey, and just touch base with these beings. And yeah, so grain of salt for whoever, but I really like talking to them and figuring this out. It just brings like meaning to my life in a cool way.
Yes. Dude, I mean, you've brought that up a couple times, and that's just been something I've thought about so much, even with like, right now my like mission statement for Divinity Ranch is documenting real life magic, which has so many meanings, pun unintended actually. But as I've like gone through that, there have been so many times where I have just kept coming back to like reconnecting ourselves and each other with the magic of meaning. Because when we find like, that's where it is, right? Like when those synchronicities happen, when you realize, oh my gosh, the light and the dark rock, like they're just rocks until suddenly they have this magical meaning for you. And that I feel like that disconnection from meaning is just so part and parcel with the depression and anxiety. Like I feel like meaninglessness is like, what's up?
Yeah, like humans are meaning making machine, like not machines, meaning making systems. Like we're
Yes.
not machines, we're gardens. We're like not any.
Yes.
Like everything we do is creating symbols of meaning, like
Yes.
systems. And like I love words specifically because they're just containers for all of these like big, beautiful, meaningful, magical things. And so I collect words like a raven, like shiny objects. I just keep them all.
That's so funny that so I've been having a lot of crazy experiences since starting on this journey with like animal spirit guides. And specifically things with owls and coyotes, but it's interesting that you say raven because raven has been like everywhere lately, like just ravens flying across my path, like raven, 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 here you are collecting shiny objects like see, and I'm like, ooh, a little spark of magic, like meaning, like yes, like that means something to me that she said raven,
I love that. Like, and then you just build these webs, like you build them within yourself and then you build them with the people in your life and who you care about. It becomes something transcendent and beautiful. And
yes. And maybe that, and maybe this is something about, and I mean, it says this in various ways in a lot of different spiritual texts, not just the Bible, but like become ye, unless you become again like a child, you won't be able to enter the kingdom of heaven. And I'm just getting like sort of a resonance about that in our conversation as far as like, doubt is obviously very connected to that meaninglessness because it's like, as if we go back to that innocence and like belief in magic of a child, then we're like, oh, yes, like meaning, making the webs, making the things, and it's all very magical. But the moment we're like, well, that's stupid, or that doesn't make sense, or who cares about rocks or ravens or whatever, it's like, there went the meaning, there went the magic.
Mm-hmm. Part of, yes. So like this last year has been a lot of like growing up for me, and not in the like becoming an adult, like being more professional, being like, but like Elizabeth Gilbert talks about how like being an adult is about tending your time. So like taking back the magical times of your days for you.
Yes.
So like you have your brain is awake and alive with your heart for 2 hours in the morning. That's your time. Like don't spend it at your 9 to 5 job. Like don't like use that time to write, use that time to sing, like take that for you. And so I love that idea of like becoming a full human as like taking care of your magic.
Yes. Is that, where does she talk about that in Big Magic?
I think, yeah, Big Magic.
I love how, I mean, it's so cool. You're referencing just so many of the women that, I mean, I aspire to and look up to so much. Cheryl Strayed, Elizabeth Gilbert. We've of course talked about Glennon Doyle.
Throw Sue Monk Kid in there.
Who?
Sue Monk Kid.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yes, Sue Monk Kid. And I feel like something for me that ties together all those women, and maybe we can, come to, because someone else I've been reading recently who I don't feel like quite does this, and has that contrast has made me realize like why I feel this way about like, we'll specifically say Elizabeth Gilbert. So I've recently been reading Gretel Ehrlich, who maybe you've heard of. She has a really famous book that you would probably really like, and anyone would probably really like, called The Solace of Open Spaces. And she's a Californian kind of just genius woman who moved out to the Bighorns and lived in Wyoming for many years. Do you know Mariah Stevens?
Yeah, so Mariah and I were like childhood friends.
Okay, so Press, her dad used to be married to Gretel Ehrlich. So
What?
I know, like, yeah, it's weird, dude. Because when I read The Solace of Open Spaces, like the inscription on the inside is like to Press. I'm like, I only know one person named Press. Like, that's a weird name. So anyway, that's neither here nor there, but it is connected. And her writing is like absolutely amazing, but there's a lack of true, call it vulnerability or authenticity there, that makes me somehow, where when I read Elizabeth Gilbert, and like obviously, you know, she's goals, she's everything, but like I don't ever come away, I come away feeling like I can do this, and I have a friend, and this is a friend who knows that I can do this. Versus when I read Gretel Ehrlich, I come away feeling like kind of like not good enough, and like, do you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, and specifically like transitioning from like academic articles, like journal articles, to like novels.
Yes.
Yeah, so like Elizabeth Gilbert versus this like 15-page thing that's scientific jargony, like that is not accessible to me, and it's not meaningful.
Yes.
I think this idea of like accessibility and usability is so connected to meaning, because like we have all this great knowledge of science and things, but it shouldn't take me 2 hours with this 15 pages to like have any idea what you're saying.
Yes. And I think it's interesting that you use the word accessibility, because you're touching on a crux of this there, which is like that when I read Gretel Ehrlich, and again, I mean, it's poetic, man. Like her writing is so good. Like she's so smart. Like she's so tough. Like we get it, Gretel. But I don't feel like I have access to her. And you know, this is obviously an interesting territory as far as like I'm also learning about like boundaries and things like that. But when it comes to our creative work, I think the reason that like this new what's the word, new guard, if you will, who I would put, you know, who the women that we just talked about in, that they, and Brene Brown, we'll put her in there too.
I love her.
And of course they're all like best friends with each other. You know, it's like you read Untamed and like Glennon Doyle's hanging out with Elizabeth Gilbert, you're like, come on. I want to hang out with you guys.
Yeah,
but
they're like a circle of women that I like access, like I like see myself in that circle.
We are in that circle. Oh no, like for real. Like just you wait. I'm manifesting that and have been for a while. So all we have to do is write the books. So, but there's this, so yeah, boundaries aside though, there's this, you know, and it's, I think maybe the boundaries thing comes into play too with like personal relationships versus like the creative work that you're putting out into the world. And there's this sense of access into the reality of their vulnerable hearts that you just come away feeling like my vulnerable heart is okay then too, all of it. And that to me is, so we talked about, you know, before we had this, you and I were kind of talking about this idea that it's more important to be real than it is to be perfect. And I just like thinking about those women and accessing that space and that vibe, I feel like is just so indicative of that.
Yeah, they show up for themselves, and in doing so they show up for the world. Like Young Pueblo, I know you like his poetry. He talks about like you heal yourself, you heal the world. And like I love Brene Brown's metaphor of the wilderness. She's like, you go into the wilderness when you do this real, true heart work, and it's scary and it's a long journey, but you can do it. Yeah. And so I love that imaging, and then like how you're like literally in the wilderness all the time now. Like this is your life, and so this is great.
No, I'm quite literally going into the wilderness. I mean, I think you and I probably both love the like literal things that then have these metaphorical meanings. So AKA my life, my human life. So I guess we'll start to wrap this up. Like, what does it mean? What that practice of and access at, what is being real or being authentic? What is that meaning and showing up for you like right now?
So for me right now, it is learning internal validation instead of external validation. So like part of that growing up that I'm doing is learning to like like I did all of the things I was supposed to do. Like I did the people pleasing. I was the high achiever. Like everything that I thought I was supposed to do to be worthwhile and like right in this world, like for my life to be taken care of, I did it. And then COVID, like, so it's out of your control. But for me, I followed those siren calls, I guess, because I thought that's how I was going to be okay. And it's showing me that like that's not how you're okay. It might look that way, you might pretend, but if I'm instead looking inward and being like, no, like it's more important that you slow down right now and let what's going to happen and like be okay for you no matter what anybody else says. Like Oprah has a quote, or I think, I don't know the specific quote, but it's like anything you do is going to have criticism, right? So like might as well choose something that is actually meaningful and real and like gives you life than something that you're supposed to do over and over and over. So yeah, I'm trying to like show up for myself and like do the work. And doing the work means like looking, like being honest with myself. Like where am I bullshitting myself? What is my shit? Like where, like I need to fix that, and like being accountable there. And then also like being awake to my magic, being like, Regina, you're really good at loving people. And that's scary for some people, and that's okay. Or like, Regina, you're really good at being able to like look at a leaf and be like, oh my goodness, this is magical. Or like stop and see the sunset. Like all of those things are about like showing up and being real. And then slowly that turns into taking all these collections of words and like turning them into my own writing. But it gathers for a long time first, and then it comes out into the world.
So is there a place, are you going to give me a place to link to where people can find some of your writing right now?
Yeah, so I have a personal website. I need to update it. I made it when I got yeah, I made it when I got back from India, and it has all the writing I did in India, and then a couple new blog posts. And then I'm also in charge of like the marketing and social media for Frontier Neurosciences, and I started a newsletter and a blog for them. That's more like academic-y stuff.
But still, it's fascinating neuroscience information with your poetic touch. And that's your dad's
That's my dad's practice, yeah. And then I have 2 published articles with the Tucson CSA, so I can
we'll just link to all. Yeah, send me all of that if anyone wants to read your writing, because I know I do.
Yeah, thank you.
So yeah, it's really interesting too that I'll just finish a bit with this, I guess. This idea of slowing down has really been hitting hard for me. And I had sort of a funny experience this morning I came into it's interesting that, that's where you end up touching on when it comes to being real, because I came into this conversation thinking about slowing down. And this morning I had such a funny experience where I had all of these leaks going on in my van, which was very like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? And then my dog had pushed off the seat cover from my front seat into the cat litter. So, and my cat had peed on the seat cover then because it was covering and I'm just like, like all of these things. And I'm parked out. I had like moved from under the tree I was parked in, which was probably contributing to all the water coming down on my van. And so I'm like parked like kind of on the side of the road out in this dirt road by the national forest. And this Jeep just comes like rampaging up the road, which I'm like, great. Like this is the last thing I need right now. Like my dogs are loose. Like I'm just all over the place. And this Jeep, like you can just feel the energy is like, instead of being like, oh, I'll just like slow down for this one obstacle in my path, just like self-righteous and like just drives by like as fast as possible. And I'm just like, are you kidding me? And then, I was going to like repress my judgment, but I was like, just say what you need to say. And so I said out loud, I was like, you've made it all the way back here, 6 miles on dirt road to the forest. You're out here in the wilderness. You're getting to drive your Jeep and you have one obstacle on your way. Like, could you not just slow down for a moment and then you get to speed up afterwards? And as soon as I said that out loud, I was just like, oh, like, because here I am living my dream. And sure, there's a couple leaks, and my cat peed on my seat cover in the litter box. At least it was in the litter box, not on the seat. And it's like, just slow down for these obstacles, and it's okay. Like, and then I
There's
was
this,
just so thankful.
there's this quote that it's like, don't worry about time. You have all the time you need. You are eternal. And like, I keep coming back to that because I get into these modes where I'm like rushing, and I'm like I have this narrative where like now is a time in my life where I'm so supposed to be like hustling. Like, this is the hustle, Regina. And I'm like, okay, the hustle didn't work before. It's not going to work now.
Let's like die, hustle, die.
Yeah.
Like,
you work until you die, and that's it. And I'm like, no, that's not the life I want. And so like I'm learning that like being and striving can be like, I don't have to strive all the time. I can flow, and it's okay. I don't believe there are moments where I'm better at believing that than other moments. Like, it's daily, it's a cycle.
right.
But yeah, I
Amen.
have time. You have time. We all have time. It's okay.
We do. And it's all, what does the Tao say? It's something like, and this is Stephen Mitchell's translation of it, but it's something like, there's a time for being ahead. There's a time for being behind. There's a time for sprinting. There's a time for standing still. And, I think that I'd be interested. Do you know what your rising sign is in astrology?
I don't off the top of my head, but I could look, like I have it on my phone probably.
I just feel like there's a similar energy, at least that I feel like there is between us, of like sort of this like intensity of striving and sort of the ability to like go do things, which is, important. Like, our souls have chosen these bodies for a reason. And what good is whatever we strive for and produce if it's done from this frantic place of striving?
Yes. Yeah. Like, we're good at making things happen. Like, we have that capability, and then it's kind of addictive. You feel like you can keep making all these things happen, and then you, like, for like my PhDs or something, like it doesn't happen, and then I'm like, oh no, I'm a worthless human being. And it's like, no. Like,
wait a second.
Yeah.
Wait a second. Well, and I'm so thankful for this. I'm so thankful for everything that has happened to bring you to exactly where you are now, because you are just, I like genuinely, if you want to know my real like takeaway at this point from this conversation, I'm like, I can't wait to read your book. Every book you write.
That makes me so, like, that just spoke to my heart. And so thank you.
Yeah. Well, I really mean that. You're such a beautiful blend of super intelligent and super authentic, and that place between, the brain and the heart, and that expression is a gift. So
Thank you.
yeah. Well, I am so glad. Thank you, Janelle, for connecting us again, of course.
Yeah.
And I am so glad that you agreed to do this. And I really, as far as I'm concerned, this is the first of, ongoing conversations. And I'm just, I'm really thankful for you. So I will link to, you send me links to the books and everything, and I'll link to your blog and all the things, Regina Gee, down below. And I will talk to you soon.
This was lovely. Thank you for bringing some vibrancy to my Monday.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm literally like, what day is it? So
Time is a concept.
We have time.
Thanks, Regina.
Thanks, Regina.